Hi, my name is Sophia, and welcome to 4.2, the animated summary. 4.1 left off on the end of the 1905 revolution, Lenin in who knows where, strikes popping up all across Russia, Nicholas II on very thin ice with the Russian people, the Duma disbanded, and the economy going up very slightly. The year is 1914, and knock knock, who's there? It's World War I. But how did this even start? Well, the July 1914 crisis was the murder of the heir to the Austrian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and how we have seen in times past, when something happens to the throne, all hell breaks loose, specifically war. One thing led to another, and soon Russia was at war with both Germany and Austria-Hungary, which is not good based on what I just mentioned earlier. So naturally, as was a trend in Europe, people loved war, which helped boost national pride. But what was a key detail here was that Russia was rallying around the nation, and not the Tsar, which you will see affect things deeply afterwards. This also upset Lenin, who was in irrelevant Switzerland, and he wanted the workers to revolt, but not all people get what they want, Lenin. Meanwhile, the military had drastically gained more attention by the government, and they spent lots of money to make them larger and better. They outnumbered the German military, invading East Germany, but the government forgot one thing: modernizing. They had horses, and they took lots of resources to maintain. Most cavalry died trying to charge their enemy, and their bayonets were no match for the German machine guns. So it wasn't good for the Russians. So let's check up on them at the Battle of Tannenberg. Well, Russia realized they couldn't defeat Germany in an offensive war. But not only were they suffering on the front lines, but the Russian people were also suffering major losses. They were lacking food and clothes. Ammunition was piled up because of the inefficiency of transport, and generals didn't do anything to change their methods to accommodate this war. These losses impacted the population by displacing 500,000 peasants, and tensions rose. Hey, so we're not doing too hot right now, and I don't think the peasants are getting any happier. Ideas? Kevin? Huh? We can make them new cities where we can provide them medical aid? Genius! And so, the Union of Towns and the Union of Zemstvos were created. Their main purpose was to provide medical help and provisions to the military, which they partially succeeded in. Good job, local governments. But since these local governments weren't backed by the central government, they didn't have many funds, and they weren't able to face the crisis alone. So, Russia had no money, which led to all sorts of problems, but I'll give you the short rundown. Inflation, food shortages, strikes in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and unrest in all social classes. And through all of this, Nicholas II refused to change his ways, recalled upon the Duma, and appointed ministers who were just as incompetent as him. Recalling the Duma led to them forming the Progressive Bloc that criticized the regime. This ended up in the Duma being shut down yet again. So, where does this leave Nicholas II? Well, since Russia was slowly collapsing, he decided to do something. But what did he do? Did he give the hungry some food? Did he help the military modernize? Did he actually get his together? No, no, and no. His solution? If the military can't do that good a job, maybe I can. That's right, Nicholas II on the front lines. How poorly that went. He had no military training, so he was as helpful as a 3-month-old baby. He didn't inspire anyone and was a waste of supplies. His absence left Russia with no ruler, as he went to mainly visit hospitals and parades. Lastly, he was in the middle of nowhere, so you can imagine what was happening back at home. With Alexandra, the Tsarina and Nicholas's wife, Russia declined even more. She was a German, which made people suspect that she was a German spy. She was totally ineffective as a woman in power, but guess who was effective and wasn't even a royal? Rasputin. Born in the filth, Rasputin was a self-proclaimed healer and was known for healing Alexandra's son Alexei, who had hemophilia. This earned him love from the queen, and she began asking him for advice, which began impacting her decisions drastically after Nicholas left. People weren't too happy about this because Rasputin had, well, a reputation. So they murdered him. Who is they? Well, conservative courtiers killed him because of his tarnishing of the king's reputation. Enough of the royalty. How were the people? Well, the people were pissed. Industrial workers wanted two things: food and the end of the war. This caught on, and soon many people started striking. On International Women's Day, March 8th, thousands of women took to the streets, and they weren't stopped because the police force had sympathy for the protesters. Meanwhile, on the front lines, soldiers abandoned the war effort, and they were told to return by their officers. When they refused, they fired on the officers. Nicholas, meanwhile, was frolicking 600 kilometers away from Petrograd, unaware of what was happening. Radical Duma members formed a provisional committee, while the Petrograd Soviet of soldiers, sailors, and workers was formed. This created tension if the two bodies would join forces or not. Nicholas then got a call about what was happening in Petrograd, and he thought, hey, I know it's hell on earth in Petrograd right now, but how about I go and pay them a visit? Maybe that'll calm them down, and hopped on the nearest train to go to Petrograd. On his way to Petrograd, though, military officers stopped him at the city of Pskov. Hey, guys, what's up? Nicholas, you have to give up the throne, for your safety. Hey, wait a minute, this isn't Petrograd. Give up the throne. And so, Nicholas gave up the throne. He tried to put Alexei on the throne, but he was far too young. So, he nominated his brother, who immediately noped out of the situation, which left the Duma committee, now the provisional government, in charge. Where were the Bolsheviks? I don't hear you asking. They weren't responsible in any way for Nicholas's downfall, and they were surprised by what had happened. Lenin, as you can infer, was awfully pleased by the Tsar's downfall. The Tsarist regime collapsed because of the inability to defend the nation, Nicholas's inability to connect with the people, and Russia's economical and transportation situation. After they sent Nicholas to the retirement home, the provisional government tried to make the nation stable and continued the war. Key word there is tried, because they failed, miserably. It was made up of liberals with a dash of socialists in the mix, and they had 2 prime ministers. This provisional government only lasted 8 months. Why did they only last 8 months? 2 reasons. Firstly, because it came from the Duma, which itself was highly corrupted because of its rigged electoral system. Secondly, because it was forced to share power with the Petrograd Soviet. The Petrograd Soviet wasn't exactly hostile to the provisional government and wasn't initially dominated by Bolsheviks. They actually accomplished great things together, like reforms. But the very existence of the Soviet did bring up problems, like saying it would obey the military commission of the State Duma. This meant the government didn't have any control over the army. This, along with not being able to provide food, led to the government's imminent downfall. Now, I know you're at the edge of your seats. Who would take control afterwards? You're gonna have to pay attention next class, but I can give you a hint. He's lean, mean, and his mustache choice is utterly obscene. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.